Dust hung over Lancaster's stockyard like smoke from a fire that never ended. Clay Sutton came for a bay stallion, nothing else. He kept to the rail, bidding once, twice, winning clean. Then the auctioneer's cane tapped again, and four girls were let out single file. Heads down, hair shorn uneven, rawhide tags knotted at their throats. No pleading, no tears, only a practiced stillness that tasted wrong to Clay's tongue. The yard shifted. Some men laughed, others whistled. Clay's palm tightened on the bill of sale for his horse. He told himself to walk away. But their eyes, four brief flashes, gray, hazel, dark brown, sky blue, caught in his ribs like burrs. Lot 73, parcel of 4. Bids rose quick, cruel sport. Clay cleared his throat once, voice rough from seasons without talk. 200. Silence cracked. A rancher scoffed. A gambler spat dust. The gavel fell. Paper changed hands. Clay untied the tags, pocketed them like spent bullets. The smallest girl flinched. Clay removed his hat, knelt to her height, and, because there were no words fit, only nodded toward the waiting wagon. Road home cut through sage flats rinsed by sunset. The girls sat on feed sacks, shoulders brushing but eyes forward. Clay drove, reins steady, thinking of the wife buried under cottonwoods, of the cradle still hanging from rafters, empty. He wondered if ghosts felt surprise. At Sutton Ranch, the windmill groaned a welcome. Clay lit the lantern in the bunkhouse, unused since ranch hands drifted south for richer grass. Fresh blankets, tin cups, water from the cool side of the well. He showed them the bolt on the inside of the door, then left. Freedom tasted better proved, not promised. Outside, coyotes rehearsed their mournful song. Clay slept on porch boards, rifle across knees, stallion nickering in the round pen. Night passed slow. No screams, no footsteps. Just breathing. 5 rhythms where one used to echo alone. Morning. He cooked beans, left them on the bunkhouse step. The eldest, 12 maybe, carried the pot back scrubbed clean. She pointed to herself, tapped chest twice. Ella, her fingers spelled in the dust. The others followed. Ruth, June, Ida. 4 names. Clay tipped his brim. Work filled the hours, fixing corral slats, hauling creek water, teaching them the brush's gentle drag across horsehair. June never met his gaze. Ruth startled at any sudden boot scuff. Ella watched everything like a hawk. Ida, mute, hummed through her teeth when nervous. By sundown, the barn smelled of fresh hay and timid hope. Clay spread bedroll again outside their door. Stars wheeled. He realized the porch felt less like penance tonight. Inside, faint whispers threaded the dark. Sisters testing language once taken. Clay closed his eyes on a half-smile that hurt the way new boots do. Promise dressed as pain. Week slid into week the way creek water finds low ground. Quiet, certain, carving change a fingertip at a time. Clay rose before dawn, cooked corn mash, left it steaming on the bunkhouse sill. The girls began returning the pot full, first with creek stones scrubbed clean, later with eggs they'd gathered unseen from barn rafters. Small trades, silent contracts. Ruth, the skittish one, learned fences first. She followed Clay along the north line, fixing wire with hands that trembled until dusk dyed them steady. June stayed near the pump, drawing water, scrubbing troughs till boards shone pale. Her eyes skated past any boot heel, but the goats chewed from her palm without fear. Ida never spoke, yet songs thrummed in her throat while she stacked firewood, notes so soft they felt like remembering rain. And Ella, watchful Ella, counted nails, rationed oats, mapped the yard better than any hired hand Clay ever paid. One evening, Clay found a paper scrap tucked under his dinner plate, lines of pencil looping careful, a poem about a mare-breathing frost, signed with a single letter. J. He looked toward the bunkhouse window. Curtains shifted once, then stilled. Clay folded the poem, slid it into his ledger, heart thudding like hoof against stall door. Mid-month, a freight rider brought mail, rust-stamped flyer announcing reward for runaway indentures, description matching 4 sisters, property of Shelby and Sons. Clay's jaw worked. He paid the writer to forget the stop, then burned the paper in the stove, watching words twist into coal. That night, thunder rolled over plain. Storm drove Ella to porch, fists tight. "They'll come," she said, first voice he'd heard. Clay answered with action. Moved stallion to upper pasture, hitched wagon for escape if needed, but left bunkhouse bolt untouched. Trust had to breathe. Rain quit by dawn, leaving world rinsed. Clay saddled old Appaloosa, rode to town, bought 4 canvas dresses, a slate, chalk, seed for winter greens. Storekeeper pried for gossip. Clay paid in coin and silence. On return, he strung a wire from bunkhouse to porch, tin triangles rattling warning if crossed. Ella watched, nodded once. Approval, not fear. Mornings grew colder. Clay set Ida on gentle draft horse, led her round corral until her hum turned to laugh. Ruth learned to shoot, recoil bruised but grin stuck. June drew maps in dirt, rail lines, rivers east. Dreams traced where words stayed shy. Clay knelt beside, added mountains, whispered which passes stayed open come snow. Her smile flickered, first sunrise after long eclipse. One dusk, Ella found Clay sanding a cradle he'd stored 10 winters. She ran fingers over rail, then lifted her hand as if blessing wood. "Not for ghosts," he said, voice cracked dry. "For calves comes spring, keeps them from coyotes." She answered only with a glance that saw through lies but spared him. That night, 4 bowls clinked onto his porch table, steaming stew rich with herbs Clay never planted. Ella stood back, sisters beside her, eyes waiting. Clay removed his hat, seated himself at head of plank bench, and for the first time since grave soil settled, he ate with family, thunderless, under stars. Outside, wire triangles swayed in breeze, singing a song of watchfulness already shared. First frost traced the water trough one brittle dawn. Clay watched vapor curl from the girl's breath as they crossed the yard, quilt shawls held tight. Winter here came sudden. A man either prepared or begged mercy. He chose work. They began in the old hayloft, a drafty cavern pigeons had claimed. Clay dragged cedar planks up the ladder. Ruth hammered, Ella measured. June counted nails. Ida swept husk and dropping. Boards met joist with muffled thud, a floor strong enough for cots. By dusk, lantern light soaked new walls like honey. The loft smelled of fresh sawn hope. During supper, Clay slid a slate toward Ella. "Numbers," he said. She blinked, aware he knew of her tally books. Chalk scratched, 17 sacks oats, 3 barrels salt, 28 head cattle. Clay nodded, her ledger now ranch law. June traced letters beside numbers, shy finger drawing EAST along slate edge. Clay added arrow westward, wrote HOME beneath. June smiled small, map dreams folded but not gone. Cold drove them indoors evenings. Clay fetched the battered harmonica he hadn't touched since funeral day. Ida's eyes widened. She pointed, question humming silent. He played low, tentative. "Shenandoah." Ida closed lids, head swaying, hum threading through tune until sound felt whole. Ruth curled on rug, listening, shoulders unclenched. Ella stitched torn blanket, needle rising in time with notes. The room, once spare, breathed family. Snow threatened by mid-month. Clay rode stallion to Canyon Ridge, felled dead pine, sledged logs home. He saw horse tracks intersecting his own. Narrow shoes, rider light. Not sheriff, not traitor. He covered sign with brush, mind-tallying rifle rounds left. That night he oiled Winchester, set it behind bunkhouse door. Ella noticed, said nothing, but wedge of fear slid back into her stance. Clay spoke soft. "Wire'll sing first." She exhaled, shoulders easing. 3 days later, hoarfrost turned meadow silver. Clay led girls to creek bank, showed how ice thickens near still bends. Ruth knelt, touched crystal, laughed. Sound rough, unused. June sketched frost shapes with a stick. Ida pressed ear to opaque glass, listening to water's secret song. Ella watched Clay's face instead of creek, as though gauging weather in his eyes. Clouds rolled iron gray. Snow fell that night, soft as ash. They crowded loft, each with blanket layers. Clay made rounds, checking stove, banked coals. He paused at calf cradle now stuffed with extra quilts, a porcelain button sewn to one rail. A thank you from Ella, he guessed. He brushed dust from curved wood, felt grief loosen another stitch. Wind rose near midnight. Wire triangles rattled. Once, twice, then stopped. Clay slid from bunkhouse, rifle ready. Moon-silvered yard. At fence line, a figure on narrow-shod horse studied buildings. Hat brim hid face. Coat too fine for Wrangler. Rider saw Clay, turned, vanished into cottonwoods without word or weapon. Hoofbeats sank into snow hush. Clay did not pursue. Bullets solved little in dark. Inside, Ella waited by door. He said only, "Soon?" She nodded, placed small folded page in his palm. Poem of cedar scent and watchful stars. He tucked it over heart, warmth spreading like sunrise. Morning broke clear. Prince by fence confirmed lone scout. Clay shod the stallion with sharper ice shoes, hitched sleigh runners to wagon, stocked barrels of water in barn, siege work. Yet he also sanded more planks, built bookshelf in loft, filled it with weather almanac, hymn book, dime novel. When snow traps bodies, he thought, words must still walk. At supper, he told them about scout sign, the coming claim. Ruth's spoon stopped midair. June's gaze darted east. Ida's hum died. Ella rose, set hand on his shoulder. First touch she'd offered. "We stay," she whispered. Clay swallowed the lump her vow forged and answered with 3 words he once believed he'd never say again. "This is home." The first hard snow sealed the yard, but couldn't silence the small unease that still walked inside each girl. Clay rose before daylight, slid a single round into the Winchester, and ran a gloved hand along the wire bell line strung from porch to corral. All clear. He grained the bay, stirred honey into a pail of hot milk, and carried it to the bunkhouse step. Ella abrió la puerta un poco, mejillas iluminadas por el frío. "Scout again?" Ruth whispered behind her. Clay nodded. Instead of words, he tapped the inner bolt and mimed a whistle. "If the night cries, call me." Days settled into white silence. Snow fell in patient layers that muffled every footstep. The hayloft, now their room, glowed with stove heat and lamplight. June drew imaginary railroad maps on the old slate, then erased them and waited for spring. Ida stitched rag dolls from scrap, humming tuneless comfort. Ruth walked fence lines beside Clay, learning the feel of barbed wire and mittens and the balanced weight of her little coach gun. Mail came on a lurching freight sledge, a printed reward notice from Shelby and Sons, complete with iron seal and the girls' descriptions. Clay locked the barn, stoked the stove until it roared, and fed the poster to the flames. He watched the letters curl to black dust, as though burning a brand right out of a hide. Nights were wind and music. Clay found the harmonica he hadn't touched since the funeral, wiped the reeds, and tried Shenandoah. Ida leaned close, eyes wide, and let her silent hum blend beneath the melody. Ruth sat cross-legged on the rug, shoulders finally loose. Ella mended a blanket, needle rising in rhythm with the notes. June listened from the top step, tracing the tune in the frost on the window glass. Toward the end of the month, Clay spotted narrow horse tracks circling the south ridge. Light rider, glassy shoes, not a ranch hand. That evening, he oiled the Winchester and set it behind the bunkhouse door. Ella caught the motion. "Soon?" she asked, voice low. "Soon," he answered. She inhaled and instead of shrinking, laid a poem, fresh pencil on scrap paper, beside his plate at supper. "Cedar holds the winter sky. Wire bells guard the night." Clay folded the scrap and slipped it over his heart. The scout returned on a moon-bright night. Bells rang once, twice, then stopped. Clay stepped outside into silvered snow. A lone rider sat at the far fence, coat too fine for any cowboy. Their eyes met across 30 yards of white. Clay raised the rifle but held fire. The stranger wheeled and vanished into the cottonwoods without a word. Inside, Ella waited by the stove. Clay told her simply, "He's measuring us." She set a gentle hand on his rough sleeve, the first touch she ever offered him. "So are we," she whispered back. Next morning, they worked like a family under siege, without panic, only purpose. Clay sharpened ice shoes for the stallion, hung extra lanterns, stacked coal by the door. Ruth practiced chambering shells until the motion clicked smooth. June organized stores, chalking counts on the slate. Ida split kindling and laid it in patient rows. That night, after chores and stew, Clay spoke the truth aloud. If they ride in, we stand. This place is home. Ruth's spoon paused, eyes shining. June's shoulders squared. Ida's hum deepened. Ella met his gaze and answered with 3 words that weighed more than any vow. Then we stay. The wind outside rattled the wire bells, but the sound felt almost like a hymn. 4 notes, one for each girl, carried across the snow to the man who had never meant to be anyone's father and now could not imagine letting them go. The scout returned at dawn 3 days later, but this time he didn't ride off. He opened the south gate as though it already belonged to him, reined in beside the corral, and let 2 larger shadows roll in behind. Shelby men, broad-shouldered, coats unbuttoned to show pistols they meant to use. Frost cracked under their horses. Wire bells clanged a warning sharp enough to wake the ice. Clay stepped from the barn, rifle level, breath ghosting the clear air. Ella and Ruth watched from the loft window, shutters parted a thumb width. Ida held June's hand, both still as carved cedar. The leader tipped his hat just far enough to be polite. Name's Grady Shelby. I'm here for my property. 1 girl'll do to start, the eldest. Clay's voice came out low gravel. Wrong gate, no property here. Shelby flicked a paper, reward notice re-inked and notarized. Law says otherwise. Law isn't the same as right, Clay answered, but he could feel his pulse tick against the stock. He needed minutes, enough for the girls to reach the ladder he'd shown them, enough for Ruth to chamber her first steady shot. Shelby dismounted, boots sinking to hock-deep crust. We can settle quiet, he said. His men shifted, palms brushing gun butts. Clay glanced toward the porch. Ella stood there now, coat buttoned, chin high. She wasn't hiding. She was choosing where the world would see her. Behind her, Ruth appeared, shotgun balanced like a question already answered. Shelby followed Clay's gaze, smirk fading. You teaching them to fight? They'll bleed first, you know. Maybe, Clay said. Maybe not. Snow squeaked, a sound more fragile than a trigger pull. Ida stepped forward, small figure wrapped in 2 scarves. Her mittened hand lifted the harmonica, and without asking anyone's leave, she blew 1 clear note. It hung in the cold, neither sad nor glad, just living. June's voice, a whisper, followed. No one owns a song. Something shifted. Shelby's horses stamped, restless under that note. The men saw not chattel but 4 girls standing their own porch, and a rancher who would burn every fence post before giving them back. Doubt entered their eyes. Shelby's anger filled the gap. He drew. Clay fired first. Bullets split Shelby's hatband, sent the brim spinning. Ruth's shotgun boomed. Snow leapt at the second rider's feet. Horses screamed, bolted sideways. In the scramble, Shelby slipped, fell hard, gun skittering into white glare. Silence after gunfire feels like prayer. Clay kept the rifle trained while Ruth reloaded with hands that no longer shook. Ella strode into the yard, picked up Shelby's revolver, broke it open, spilled cartridges into the snow. Wordless judgment. Shelby pushed to his knees, fury stripped to fear. You'll swing for this. Not today, Clay said, or any day you come back. He let them ride out, hatless, unarmed, reward notice left crumpled beneath the loft window. Only when hoofbeats faded did Clay lower the rifle. Ida blew a second note, this one softer, like a goodbye the wind itself would keep private. Inside, stove heat met the girls at the door. Clay set the Winchester aside, unsure what a father does after a first battle won. Ella answered. She put the kettle on. Ruth gathered mugs. June fetched the ledger, and Ida slipped the harmonica into Clay's pocket as though it had always been his. Outside, fresh snow began to fall, covering the trampled yard, the spent shells, and the path the Shelby men took away from a home that now had more than wire and rifles to guard it. It had voices, spoken, sung, and silent, that no paper could ever brand again. That night the temperature fell hard, as if the valley itself wanted every footprint frozen in place. Clay walked the yard once more, hammering each gate latch until metal rang clear, slept little, though quiet lay heavy as wool. When dawn bled thin over the ridge, fresh snow showed only rabbit prints and a single coyote trail skirting wide. No horses, no Shelby. Inside the loft, the stove pulsed steady heat. June woke first, set beans to simmer. Ida rolled strips of cloth, a silent inventory of wounds never taken. Ruth wrote a terse line in the new ledger. Day kept. Ella, chalk in hand, marked grain rations, then drew a short vertical stroke beside the date, her own way to tally days free. Clay watched from the ladder, unseen. The girls had made the loft theirs. Quilts hung as walls. The bookshelf now held poems copied onto scraps, the cradle stuffed with extra kindling. It looked not like refuge but decision. Snow deepened and so did routine. Ruth rode fence alone for the first time, leaving a narrow track of courage around the north pasture. June coaxed Ida to breathe warmth onto slate letters, teaching her silent sister how written words sing even without a voice. Ella discovered old seed packets in the barn loft. She sorted kernels by finger feel, saving the fullest for spring. Clay mended harness by lantern, thinking how the cabin felt smaller, yet somehow light. At times he caught himself reaching to touch a braid as it passed, the way a father steadies a child without thinking. Each time he pulled the hand back, surprised by its own wanting. Mid-month brought Sheriff Calhoun up the frozen trail, star dull beneath frost. He dismounted at the porch, hat in hand, respectful. "I heard about a dust-up," he said, voice white in the cold. "Shelby claims you threatened lawful retrieval." Clay set a mug of chicory on the rail between them. He drew first. "Likely," Calhoun agreed, "but Shelby's ridden east for a judge's writ. Come spring thaw, paper may march back here." He glanced toward the loft window where four shadows hovered behind the curtain. "You got time to put another kind of ink on record, Sutton. Adoption papers, guardianship, something that names them more than strays." Clay stared at the snowfield beyond the barn, horizon hard as iron. He'd buried one name already, wife, infant, and never thought to lift pen for family again. Calhoun finished the chicory, set cup down gentle. "Circuits open in March. I'll vouch if you sign." Then he rode off, leaving hoof prints crisp as signatures. That night Clay laid ledger, blank forms, and a bottle of ink on the table. The girls gathered, curiosity mixing with fear. He cleared his throat against the knot there. "Sheriff says paper will come to claim you," he began. "This paper," he tapped the form, "could claim you back if you want it." Silence held everything. Loss, hope, snow-hushed dreams. Then Ida stepped forward first, small hand resting atop his on the pen. Ruth covered hers, June next, until Ella laid her palm over them all. Clay exhaled, pressed nib to page, and beneath lamplight that flickered like slow heartbeats, he wrote the first letters of four new surnames. Ella Sutton, Ruth Sutton, June Sutton, Ida Sutton. Snow outside kept its breath, as if even winter respected ink that brave. March sunlight cracked the ice like glass under a slow boot. Creeks woke first, gurgling under snow bridges until the water cut free and spread across pasture. Clay hitched the wagon, drove the girls 12 miles to Willow Fork for circuit court, their new names folded inside a leather folder, Calhoun's sworn statement tucked on top. They rode in Sunday quiet. Ella sat up front beside Clay, papers clutched as tight as reins. June and Ida whispered slate exercises behind, tracing letters on fogged window panes. Ruth kept her coach gun under a blanket, eyes on every rise of land. Willow Fork was little more than a church, a store, and the clapboard courthouse leaning into wind. Shelby's buckskin stood tied to the hitch rail. The stallion snorted, ears flat. Clay felt the old Kansas itch between his shoulders, the one that had taught him to duck bullets. But he lifted each girl down calm as blessing. Inside, Judge Baird, spectacles, wool vest, looked startled when the pew filled with quiet children and a rancher who spoke with his hat off. Shelby rose from the opposite bench, bruised pride visible beneath city cloth. He flourished his writ. "Property absconded." Calhoun stepped forward, badge dull but voice clear. "Property has a pulse and four names now." Ella approached the bench, placed Clay's folder beside Shelby's writ, smoothed the corners, and waited. Baird read slow, lips moving. Affidavits from the storekeeper, carriage driver, school mistress who taught Ella to shape letters when no one watched. Handwriting on the adoption petition belonged to Ella herself. Shelby laughed, thin and brittle. A child's scrawl don't change a contract? June's voice, tiny certain, floated from the back. Contracts end. People don't. The judge's gaze softened, but he thumbed his law book. Blood guardianship or signed release from original owner. Without that, adoption's at my discretion. Shelby smiled like a man holding a winning hand. Clay watched the girls, Ruth gripping Ida's hand, Ida pressing the harmonica to her lips but not blowing, Ella steady but pale. Clay cleared his throat, spoke louder than the wind he usually trusted. Original owner's dead. Snakebite last fall. Record in Lancaster Undertaker's log. Shelby bought a claim to what was never his to start with. Calhoun slid a death notice across the bench, one he'd fetched at dawn. Shelby's face shifted, confidence cracking. Baird read, nodded once, then signed Clay's petition with a scratch that echoed in the hollow room. Guardianship granted. These girls are Sutton's, and no man owns them. Shelby's protest died on stiff lips. He stormed out, spurs clashing. Ruth's shoulders sagged. Ida let a single harmonica note drift, soft and relieved. June leaned into Ella, who at last allowed one small smile. Sun through morning frost. The wagon rolled home under thawing sky. Creeks brimmed. Meadow smelled of wet earth and beginnings. At the gate, Clay half expected bells to warn of ambush, but nothing stirred except robins staking branches. That night they celebrated with cornbread, sweetened by the last jar of Mercy's honey. Clay offered the first slice to Ella. She broke it into 4, shared without word. Later in the loft, Ella wrote a new line. We walked into a room with no windows and came out carrying the sky. Clay read it by lantern, hung the sheet above the cradle filled with kindling. Spring, he realized, would need that wood no longer. He'd empty the cradle, plane the rails smooth, maybe finally give it the purpose his heart had avoided. Downstairs, Ruth locked the door. June set the ledger away. Ida rested the harmonica beside Clay's folded spectacles. Outside, thaw dripped from eaves, steady, hopeful, like a clock that finally kept time with the people inside. The valley turned green almost overnight, willow tips shining like fresh pennies. Clay woke one dawn to the smell of damp earth instead of wood smoke and realized the stove had gone cold without anyone shivering. The girls were already outside, Ella measuring rows with a twine line, June scattering lettuce seed, Ida patting soil smooth, Ruth standing guard with her shotgun across folded arms, happy to watch work instead of hides. Clay sharpened the plow blade and hitched the stallion. At the first pull, Ruth stepped in, set her shotgun aside, and took the reins. Clay let her find the rhythm, soil lifted clean, black ribbons curling to either side. By noon, 5 rows lay straight as creed lines. Ida planted potatoes from shriveled eyes, humming a tune that wandered but never failed. Late that week, a mail coach rattled in with 2 parcels. The first, a cash envelope from Mercy, payment for the winter fence job Clay had in charge. The second, a letter addressed in a schoolmarm's neat hand. To Miss June Sutton, your poem found our desk and our hearts. Enclosed is a reader and slate of your own. Keep writing. June opened the box like it might bite. Inside lay a small primer, 3 pieces of chalk, and a thin green journal. Her fingers trembled, but she flipped pages, eyes bright as creek water in sun. That night she read aloud from Lesson 1, every girl taking turns on simple sentences while Clay mended harness beneath the lamp. When June closed the book, Ella whispered, again. And so they did, until words felt like seeds too, planted deep for later bloom. The only shadow came on a windless evening when the stallion returned from pasture with a fresh welt across the flank. Thin, deliberate, whip laid. Clay followed track lines to the ridge and found hoofprints that circled, watched, withdrew. No rider showed, but Ella read the sign like numbers in ledgers. Shelby's waiting for the next law day, she said. Clay nodded. Ruth hefted the coach gun, jaw set harder. Clay met Calhoun in town. The sheriff leaned against hitch rail, eyes narrowed. Shelby hired a lawyer from Abilene, talking civil seizure. Damages for theft. Clay spat dust. Only damage here is that welt on my horse. Calhoun shrugged. Judge Baird's word stands, but Shelby wants bigger paper downtown. You might need more than ink this time. Need neighbors. Clay rode the valley next dawn. Mercy's orchard, the freighter who traded oats, a Mennonite family whose barn roof he had fixed for nothing but thanks. He spoke few words, only that Shelby would ride with men before summer. Friends listened. Some nodded, some fetched rifles freshly cleaned after winter. Work didn't pause. Ella tallied tools for new bunkhouse stalls. Ida stitched saddle blankets from worn quilts. June copied planting notes into green journal, her hands steadier each day. Ruth practiced turning in the saddle at a gallop, pumping the shotgun once and re-shouldering before hooves touched ground again. Clay watched, pride and worry braided tight. One quiet dusk he carried the cradle from loft to main house, set it before the hearth, and sanded the rails smooth. When the girls came in, he explained without flinch, "For orphan calves, but maybe one day, foals, pups, anything small that needs the start." Ella ran a hand along the wood, nodded. Ida placed her newest cloth doll inside, tucking scrap blanket around its shoulders. Clay's chest tightened in a way that felt like pain, but breathed like hope. Outside, spring peepers started their chorus, loud and certain. The valley listened, as if weighing whether to echo. And somewhere on the far side of the ridge, a man named Shelby counted days on a calendar, already smudged by anger. Not knowing that every dawn he waited, the Sutton name grew deeper into the land, rooted by seed lines, rifle drills, whispered reading, and the quiet promise of a cradle meant to hold whatever life the ranch could keep safe. July burned the valley yellow. Wind carried no scent but dust and gun oil, and every noon the girls saw a haze on the southern ridge. Men scouting, counting fences, judging distance. Shelby was close enough now that meadowlarks flew silent. Clay set routine aside for drill. At dawn, Ruth and Ella saddled the stallion and the bay mare, riding the perimeter, while Clay led June and Ida to the dry creek bed. There he taught them to pack cool clay against the log walls they'd built for cover, how to load the small-bore rifle June could shoulder, how to blow 3 notes on Ida's harmonica as a signal that would carry above gunfire. Ida practiced until the sound rang clear and fierce, no trace of her once timid hum. Toward dusk, as they watered seedlings, a distant whistle drifted across the plain. Freight heading west, engine powerful as a fresh chapter. June looked up, eyes tracing the invisible track, then smiled and returned to her watering can. The road was still out there, but home was here. Clay fetched the cradle from the main room and carried it to the loft. "Won't hold calves anymore," he said. "Too many pups due from the collie." Ella entendió la oferta. El hogar necesitaba lugares suaves para los comienzos. Ida lined the cradle with her newest cloth doll. Ruth set a folded quilt square beside it. June placed her extra chalk. Clay stood watching until tears threatened, then pretended to dust the windowsill. After supper, cornbread and late peas, the girls coaxed Clay to bring the harmonica outside. Night folded warm around them. Crickets tuned a low accompaniment. Clay played Sweet Betsy, notes easy, sure. Ida hummed harmony. June beat time with a spoon on the porch rail. Ruth danced a slow circle in the yard, shotgun finally absent. Ella sat on the top step, writing a final verse by moonlight. When the tune ended, they didn't rush inside. They watched the walnut silhouette against the sky, leaves silver in starlight, roots already gripping their soil. Clay sensed the valley itself had shifted. What once felt like borrowed land now echoed with their names spoken in frog song and rustling grass. He cleared his throat. "Tomorrow we mend the east fence," he said. Ella cerró su cuaderno, asintió. Ruth yawned, satisfied. June tucked the chalk in her pocket. Ida stole the harmonica, hid it behind her back with a grin. They went in, lamplight spilling across the porch and onto the path Shelby's horse had carved. Tracks now softened by rain, soon to be lost in new grass. Clay lingered a moment, hand on the walnut's slender trunk, and heard the quiet truth the land finally said back. Family is what stays to grow after the danger leaves. Inside, the door closed with a gentle clack. Lamps dimmed, and beyond the window the walnut whispered under the night wind, standing witness to a ranch no longer haunted by empty rooms, but busy with 4 daughters whose voices needed no permission to be loud in the morning.